this is Esther with Discover Your Origins. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the 1830 U.S. Census. So let's go to the National Archives page. The 1830 census was the fifth census that the U.S. took since 1790. The official census day was June 1st, 1830, and was finished in about 6 months. The U.S. Marshals were responsible for taking the census with their assistants, and they did have pre-printed forms this time. The census was tallied and the statistics were sent to Martin Van Buren, and then the actual census sheets were stored with the district courts, eventually forwarded to Washington, D.C., where they were bound into books. The number of questions that were asked in the census, as you can see as I'm scrolling, was a lot more than the previous census years. The age groupings were smaller, so they were in 5-year increments to a certain point, and then 10-year increments, and then over the age of 100 years old. There were also age groupings for slaves and free colored persons. There was also a couple of extra questions. The Census Bureau wanted to know who was deaf and dumb and blind, number of aliens or foreigners that weren't naturalized, and they also wanted to know about disabilities among slaves and colored persons. So here's what the census form looked like. And you can see there's a lot more columns, but at least with the pre-printed forms, they were now labeled, so it was a little bit easier when you're looking at it to kind of figure out what the numbers mean. So once again, most of the country was included, that as far as what states existed in 1830. There were a couple of places that were included with other locations, like West Virginia was part of Virginia, that kind of thing. There are some records missing, some counties in Maryland, a county in Mississippi, and a county in South Carolina. It is also possible that there were individual census pages that were lost between the time that they were stored at the district court and then forwarded to DC to be bound into books. And of course, you can see the 1830 census at all of the major genealogy sites. So let's look and see what we can learn from the statistics. And Wikipedia does a good job with the statistics. The U.S. population, the total population, increased about 33% from the previous census of 1820, which seems to be a trend in the early years of the country. We were experiencing about a 30 to 35% increase every 10 years. The most populous state was New York, and the least populous was Delaware. And I believe the most populous city was New York City, which had a population of 202,000 people. So there's a lot more statistical information on the Wikipedia page. So you're welcome to look through there. You can see they have a lot of the major cities that existed included on their page. All right, so let's look at a person on Family Search. This is Colby Ross, and this will be the first time that we can look at a census record from Tennessee, and that's where Colby Ross was living in 1830. Colby Ross was born in 1813 approximately in North Carolina, and died in 1882 in Athens, Limestone, Alabama. So he moved quite a bit. So from North Carolina to Tennessee, eventually to Alabama. Colby Ross was married twice, but the wife that he would have had in 1830 was Michael, which is a little unusual for a girl's name. You know, I haven't seen very many women with the name Michael in that time period. So that was her name. And they had 2 girls and 2 boys, at least according to what we know on Family Search. So let's go and look at the 1830 census for Colby Ross. And it's saying he was living in Franklin, Tennessee, and that's a county that's just north of the Alabama-Tennessee border. The boundaries for Franklin County changed quite a lot in the early years of Tennessee history, and so I'm not 100% sure where Colby Ross was living in 1830. We just know Franklin County, whatever that meant then. So let's look at the image here. So once again, the census instructions were to name the head of household and then just to count the individuals in the household. And you can see the pre-printed form here on Family Search. And there are two penned numbers on these sheets. There's one up here in the corner, 44, and another one, 76. According to Family Search, the page number is 76. So just be aware that there may be some variations on your source. You may need to record the image number, which is 158 on Family Search, just to be clear of what page you're actually looking at. Okay, so the columns, the top of the columns, are a little bit different than the example on the National Archives page where they wrote out the numbers for the age ranges. And here they actually used numbers, which shortened the tops of the columns for the headers. And Colby Ross is clear down here at the bottom, and so you have to move the page up and down several times to actually see the numbers and what they correlate to. And then down here at the bottom you have totals for those columns. So he's here at the bottom, Colby Ross, and Ross, at that time when there's a double S, you have one that kind of looks like it's a F or a P or some other letter, but that's two S's, so Colby Ross. And we've got some numbers here. The remaining questions for deaf and blind and whether there was enslaved, that's on the next page, the next image. And as far as Colby Ross goes, there's no other columns that are ticked except it has the total number in the household, which is 5. So we'll go back. All right, so I summarized the statistics or the numbers for Colby Ross on the blog article that goes with this video. So let's scroll down and take a look. All right, so here we go. We have one white male under the age of 5, one that's 20 to 30, a female under 5 years old, a female that's 20 to 30, and a female that's aged 60 to 70 years old. So I used the Family Search page for Colby Ross and his family to identify or try to identify each person that was listed. So we have a child here that we don't know who it is, that's under 5 years old. So this child would have been born about 1825 to 1830. And when you look at his family on Family Search, there is no child that fits that group, that age range. And then we have Colby Ross. Now the birth year estimate is 1813, but according to the 1830 census, he could have been born between 1800 and 1810, which makes a little bit more sense. But later censuses say he was born about 1813. He has a daughter, which I've attributed to be Cynthia Ann, born in 1830, and then his wife, and she's born about 1808, so she fits into that group perfectly, which makes me think that Colby Ross's birth year is probably a few years earlier than 1813. He's probably about 1808 or so as well. And then we have an unknown female that is aged 60 to 70 years old. And we don't know who this is either. This could be a mother or mother-in-law. It could be a grandmother or some other female. Most likely a family member, though, if they were in the household. So 2 mysteries here. Let's go look at Colby Ross's page again. So you can see that as far as the known children go, his oldest son was born in 1837, so he would not have been counted in the 1830 census. So there should be another child here, but unfortunately, because Tennessee records are fairly sketchy in its early history, we may never know who that other child is, other than it's a male child. And also, we don't know Colby Ross's parents. We don't know Michael's last name, and so we don't know, if that other person, female that's 60 to 70 years old, is a parent to one of these two. And it may never be solved because of the lack of records. If we can get Colby Ross back into North Carolina, which is where we believe he is born, maybe we can identify a parent for him. And then Michael, it's, without a maiden name, it'd be very difficult to identify her parents. Okay, so that's what we can learn about Colby Ross, and it's really exciting that we can finally start looking at some other states. New England has a lot of interesting things to uncover still by looking at the early censuses, but as the country is growing, it's fun to kind of start looking at some of these other places that people were starting to move to. Let's go back and just look at the census one more time. Usually you want to make a note of the people that are living next to or near your relative. So Colby Ross here. And I've looked at these names of these other people and I don't find them around Colby Ross at later dates. So 1830 represents a transition period for Colby Ross where he's just temporarily living in a location. Normally, people traveled together in groups. And so it is a little strange to me that I've not been able to place any of these other people in the same areas as Colby Ross as he's kind of migrating across the country and eventually landing in Alabama. But it is worth noting these names because you just never know. We have an Edom Holden, several Holdens actually, and some of these other names. And there are a couple of women, so we have a Charlotte Smith up here at the top. So, it's interesting looking at the early census records and trying to figure out the family arrangement. I figured that Colby Ross and Michael were a younger couple, probably in their early 20s, just starting out on their own, on their new life adventure into a new place. And so it would have been pretty exciting for them, I think. Travel in that time period would have been very difficult. And so, who knows what happened to them. So stay tuned. We're going to look at Colby Ross again in 1840 and see what has happened to him in the next 10 years. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching.